Hello and welcome to another Bodgit and Leggit video. Now we have got a few videos coming up on a freelander. The first one we're going to do is the carrier bearings. Now if you don't know what a carrier bearing is, basically they carry the drive shaft, hence the word carrier bearing. And as you can see, we've got two on here. Depending on what car you've got, and you might have 2, 3, you might have none. It just depends on your actual drive shaft. But as you can hear, we've got one here, and if I press down on this, hopefully that's coming through, and on this one, so they're just banging. So in other words, when the drive shaft is spinning round, it's not spinning round freely, it's spinning round and whapping up and down like this, which obviously isn't good for anything, and which can cause a lot of damage to your transfer box. It can cause damage to your rear diff, it can cause damage to your VCU unit. And these aren't cheap, these VCU units, they're just not cheap at all. So you don't really want to be causing any damage or anything like this. So what we're going to do, we're going to replace the two carrier bearings. They are fairly straightforward. You just have to be aware of a few things. You need to mark a few things before you actually put it back. So yeah, let's get cracking into it. Now I've just zoomed in a bit closer so you can see. We've got 2 bolts either side of it, and as you can see, there's actually slotted, the holes are slotted, so you can move this forward or backwards to get it perfectly lined up. And hopefully, I don't know if it's going to show, but in the middle here, you can't quite see, is the bolt to separate the actual shaft from this CVU unit. So we need to take off that bolt and the 2 bolts, and it's essentially out. But before we do that, we need to mark this so we get this back in exactly the same spot. We don't want to take this out and turn this and put it back in, because what we could do is we could cause an imbalance in the drive shaft. So you want to make sure the drive shaft goes back on the exact same splines as it came off. And kind of the easiest way to do it is just get some Tipex, which of course it's not going to work upside down. So we'll try it here on the side. Doesn't really matter where you mark it, as long as you get some sort of mark on it. I'm just going to go along here and put it. So we know that the marks, you might not be able to see what I've done, but I've just marked the actual coupling here, and I've also marked where it goes into the viscous unit here. So just when we pull it apart, we know we more or less get it back. You can also, if you want, you kind of mark this. You can see this is more or less in the middle. So if I just mark the bolt there, but again, this is not so much important because the unit you get might not be exactly the same, and you might need to move it. The only thing you do need to be aware of, we have some funny looking washers, as you can see, so we need to get the washers the right way. And once you look at the old one, you kind of see where they go. It's not difficult. They go that way, so they face on this one. This one's this end here is facing towards the back. But actually, on the joint itself, you can see there's a flat end here, and as I turn it round, it goes in maybe a half an inch, well, an inch. So we need to make sure we get this the right way around. So in other words, it goes that way. You can see the part where it's faced in. We don't turn it that way, because again, we're going to get, well, it won't fit properly for a start, but not only that, we'll get a whole horrible vibration. So you need to know which way it goes round, mark it before you put it back in, because then you can't really get confused. Right, you can put the handbrake on and put it in gear if you want. It can kind of make everything a bit easier rather than anything from turning. But inside here is a 17mm, and normally they're not particularly tight. And when you get it off a few threads, you'll see like a plate. I don't know if I can move that yet. Like a washer, big washer plate, but you just need to keep twisting it off. Now what happens sometimes is you can't screw it all the way out. What you have to do sometimes is loosen the 2 bolts, bring it down a little bit because the shaft's open, and spin the bolt a little bit more. It just depends. I can move this little washer out now. So as you can see, we have kind of like a special washer they're important to obviously keep them on. It acts as a little locking device as well. I'll show you how that kind of works once we get this bolt off. And this one's actually too bad. Some of these can be a nightmare. If people have tried to take them off before and they've rounded them or doing something like that, these can be an absolute nightmare. But we're okay with this one so far, which is obviously good. And with it being kind of a Jeep and a four-wheel drive thing, you know, when people go off road with them and all that sort of stuff, they can get water in them, get a load of shit around them, which can obviously make them worse as well. Now, I can't get the bolt out just yet, but it should hopefully be out enough to actually separate it. Now what I need to do is undo these two. So it's a 10 mil, two 10 mils. What you do have to be careful of, depending on your drive shafts, when you undo this, you want to make sure it doesn't pop out your gearbox or transfer box, because you could lose all your fluid. So you need to make sure with this one it's actually bolted in so it can't come off. But some of them can just slide out, so you want to be careful of that, because you can lose all your fluid quite quickly. Now I've left the other one on, so this should still grip, it shouldn't completely come down. If you can, it's best just to replace one at a time. If you can't, if you have to take them both off, that's fair enough, but if you can, just replace them one at a time. Now this can be a bit tricky too, because it's welded in there. Right, what I've actually got is a special hammer. So it's not a normal hammer. This part of the hammer is copper. So if I hit metal, I'm going to damage the hammer, not damage the actual metal. As you can see what it does to the actual hammer. So it means you don't damage anything. A really good handy hammer. You see, you don't really want to be hitting this either, because that's not great, but right, it's just not going to come out, unfortunately. What I'm going to have to do is undo the other one as well. So I'm going to do exactly the same. No point in me filming because it's going to be identical. Once I've done that, I'll turn on the camera and we'll continue, and hopefully we can separate these when they're both down. Just might be a bit easier for me. What I had to do was I loosened both carrier bearings. I was hitting them with the rubber hammer and stuff like that, but you can't really hit these. You're not really supposed to, but with rubber hammers and copper hammers, you know, you're not going to really do too much damage. I was only hitting them lightly. Sometimes you can just split them apart that way, but this time it just didn't work out. So I'm just undoing the last bolt on the actual drive shaft itself for ones that connect to the back diff. And what I'm going to do is then release the drive shaft, and hopefully it'll just make my life a lot easier, and it will actually maybe come apart, I hope. Now, take the last bolt out. It's on my gearbox stand. Before I took this off, I also marked it with Tipp-Ex, as you can see on the top, which you do need to do. Now, I did try a few little tricks. I got my air impact chisel and I put it on the washer, so I wasn't affecting anything. And sometimes after a blast, that vibration kind of splits it, but it just didn't work at all, no matter what I did. So I've soaked it in WD. Been trying for the last hour to get this apart, and it's just not moving at all. So I'm just going to support it with my gearbox stand, and you can just see that on camera. There we go. So I'm just supporting it with my gearbox stand and hopefully try and get this thing out. Now this is the back one. So the front one is just not moving for me whatsoever. I'm just trying to get the bolt off here with a 17 mil like I did before. This one appears to be moving, which is brilliant. Now, there we go. As simple as that. Nothing to it. That's how they all should be. Now again, you need to mark it with Tipp-Ex. You can see the Tipp-Ex mark there. As soon as you get the bolt out, a couple of threads, you remove that big washer and the thing should just slide out on its splines. As you can see, this one happens to do that, where the other one is just welded, rusted, and just a nightmare. This then is kind of the special washer I was telling you about. This washer is like a lock washer as well, so there's two ends on it that's bent over, and that fits into that other bigger washer I just showed you, and that kind of stops this from coming out. That one went lovely, absolutely lovely. What I'm going to do is, before I take this bearing off, I'm going to try and get it off the other side, then I can put this on the bench. It's just easy to take the bearings off from the bench and put the new ones on, but I could just struggle with getting this one out. So as soon as I got that one out, I'll turn the camera back on and we'll continue. Yes, hello, we are on the bench, and what an absolute fucking nightmare. As you can see, I've got this one on. This one, as you know, fell out. The coupling fell out. This one, I had to completely cut the bearing off completely, as you can see. So I just got a 4-inch grinder, cutted it off. And I've left the bearing there. What I had to do in the end, I didn't like doing it. I had to get a rubber hammer and I had to hit this. Now this is just a lump of metal with like special rubber and all sorts of stuff inside. So I shouldn't have really done any damage, but this had completely seized on. Someone had put copper grease inside here. Copper grease isn't designed to be used inside here. Moly grease or something like that, yes, but do not use copper grease on the likes of this. The little bits of grit act like sandpaper, and what they do is they actually stop anything from pulling apart. They almost act like glue. And if it compacts and dries up, it's a nightmare. Copper grease is good, but it's good for its specific thing, not for everything. So what I need to do is get this bearing off. Now there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can use a bearing puller. You can cut it and then just slide it off, or you can be like me and lazy, and we're gonna air chisel it off. Well, I say that, I'm hopefully gonna do it. Lovely. So that was a nice easy way of doing it. Now this little washer I was telling you about, we have to take off. So I damaged it, but it doesn't matter. Now what we need to do is make sure everything is clean. So there's no big grooves taken out of any of the channels here, because obviously this is where the bearing sits, this is where the washer sits. These are our splines. We need to make sure our splines are in good nick. Give everything a clean. Brake fluid, absolutely brilliant stuff. First thing I need to do is put the actual washer back on, but you need to get the washer the right way. So this smooth part here has to face the bearing, not the open part. So put that in. I might just need a little bit of a persuasion going in. So just tap it. We need to get it all the way to the back. If you are going to hit it with a hammer, like I'm doing, make sure you don't hit this bit. You hit the bit here at the end, because otherwise you'll bend it. And just very light taps. We'll go all the way in, all the way to the back. There we go, so we got that in. Right, so once we got this washer on, we need to get the actual carrier bearing on. But what we need to be aware of is which way it goes on. So you've got two ways it can go on, but it is important we get it the right way. Now with most carrier bearings, the one with the bigger, so you can see the bearings more at the front. The bearing's not in the middle, it's at the front of this one. So the one with the bigger gap here is normally where the coupling comes and sits in. And the flush part here normally goes into the actual, or whatever you happen to be working on. So we need to put this on here, so you can see we've got, around here, as we can see we've got the opening here, so the coupling can fit in inside here. And one of the easiest ways to get it on, because they're not like a huge pressed bearing, you get a long reach socket. This is a 27mm, and it fits on the bearing absolutely perfectly. And get a hammer, and I'm going to just tap it from the side of it, so not the end, from the side like this. As you can see, didn't hit that hard, put no grease, put no nothing on it, and it went in really nice and easy. And as you can see, this now will spin around, because that's what has to happen. The bearing, these stay here, but the actual thing, the thing in the middle spins, or whatever you happen to have on this spins. So as you can see, we've got two bearings on absolutely perfectly. And this viscous coupling unit is ready to go back into the car. It's just, I was hoping it wouldn't have been an absolute nightmare. The other thing I've done is I've only screwed out these bolts a little bit, just thick enough to get that big washer out, because the coupling will fit over that bolt, and I'll show you that once we get underneath again. The one thing I am going to use is molly grease, and I'm going to put molly grease on all these splines, because molly grease is really good. It doesn't compact and dry out like kind of ordinary grease does. So I'm going to put it inside the splines on the drive shafts as well. Now, as you can see, we've got this ready to go back on. Also, you need to put the washer on the actual drive shaft end as well. Same way as you put it on there, just hit it with a little hammer. Sometimes it might just slide on, but it doesn't really matter. If you haven't damaged the old washer, I would leave the old washer. It's not really a big deal, but it is important to have a washer there. But now, what is important, on some drive shafts and couplings, there is splines, and there is a thicker spline, so they can only go back together one way. I don't know if this one has it. I didn't really look, to be honest, but I'm just going to line it back up with my mark so you can't go wrong. But like I said, some of them can only go on one way, and if that is the case, well, that's great, because you can't really put it on wrong. I would still mark everything just to be on the safe side though. So I've just put grease back in. This can be a bit tricky, because this might not want to go back in very easily, or it might want to go back in easy. It just depends. But I'm just going to line up the splines, so that needs to turn a tiny bit back there now. So that's my marks lined up, and as we can see, that's gone in nice and easy. That's good. They don't always necessarily do that. This is the one we had a problem, because we put proper grease on it, and we've got it out. It should be fine. So we need to do the same with the back one. We're on the back one now. I need to get my mark. We've got the bolt in place. I've got my mark here. So I need to find marks underneath. This one was the one that came out nice and easy, so I'm hoping this is going to go back nice and easy too. My marks are lined up, and yes, gone back absolutely lovely. So that's the good thing. But like I said, not all the time do they actually do this. What I'm going to do just for the minute, I'm just going to tie this up to this exhaust here, because I just want to get all my plates and everything in first before I actually push it back up. That's just going to hold it there, just so I can get all the washers back in, and just not fully tighten it, but just kind of get it nice before I eventually put it up. So I just want to doubly make sure. There's a lot of grease there, that doesn't matter. I'm going to have to take out some of that grease because I don't want it splattering everywhere. It's not the end of the world, but it just looked quite bad. So we know we are right as regards our lines. Just need to get that up like that. And what I'm going to mostly do first is just try and lift this up. See, I'm going to hit the exhaust first. So what I need to do is bring this the other way. Now, that should hopefully kind of start going up now. Now, just fighting me all the way. Right, should hopefully be up enough just to get a couple of bolts in, just to hold it in place. What I'm going to do is, I'm just going to put all the bolts in place, the 4 bolts here and the 4 bolts at the diff end. I'm going to put everything loose. Once I've done that, I'll turn the camera back on, because we need to get every bolt in place before we tighten anything. So once I got all them 8 bolts in place, I'll turn the camera back on, and yeah, we're nearly done. Now, what I've done is I've tightened the 4 bolts on the prop and the diff side. I've still got the bolts loose on the carrier bearing, but I've tightened this bolt on the far side. I'm going to show you how to do this one. Now, the only things you have to remember is you need to put this special washer down. Now, as you can see, the washer has a slit in one end. That little washer I showed you that came off the bolt has a bend in one end, and you have to make sure the bend lines up with this here, because that acts as a locking washer. If it doesn't, the bolt can come loose. So all you need to do is slide this down from the top, and I know I'm not going to be able to show you on camera, but that washer has gone in the middle of them. The little washer has gone in the middle of the bigger washer. So when I tighten this 17mm bolt, that lock washer is going to get locked between the washer. Sorry, the lock washer is going to get locked between the bigger washer and the head of the bolt. That actually stops it from coming loose. And then we'll be able to get the head of the spanner in. Now this is the thing. You have to judge it quite well, because if the bolt's too far out like it is now, the spanner won't actually fit in. So what I can hopefully do is just push out this a little bit, which unfortunately I can't. So what I'm going to have to do is screw it in by hand a little bit. I can just about do it. Couple of threads. So then I can actually get the head of the spanner in place. What you can sometimes do is get a big lever bar, get the head of the bolt and just push. And what I'm actually doing is I'm pushing out the part we separate, and that allows me then to get the spanner in. Yeah, there we go. Now all I've got to do is tighten. As I'm tightening up, the head of the bolt's going in, which will allow me to get my spanner out anyway. You just have to be careful of the washer, because the washer is now moving. So I need that little lock washer to stay in the right place. So I'm just going to bend it now. It will make a lot more sense if you do it yourself. But we just need to keep that washer in between the two legs of the bigger washer. And it's vitally important you get it right, because if you don't, this will come loose on you, and then you're going to be in all sorts of trouble. Now we're getting close now. You see everything coming back in. Now what there's actually on the other side of that lock washer, there's a little tab that hits the head of the bolt. So that's now in my way. So what I have to do is, because I can't get the spanner on properly, I have to bend that out of the way, and then just remember as it's tight to bend that little tab back. Now, I'm just going to turn it back the same way I had it before. And one of the easiest ways I found to tighten them, if you haven't put the handbrake on, if you put the handbrake on, that's okay, is just to get a little lever bar and kind of just wedge it in between there. That will allow me to move this, but hold the drive shaft in place, because it's all well and good having the handbrake on, but you need to, like you just see me there, you need to move the drive shaft around. So you kind of need the handbrake cable, the handbrake off most of the time. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to keep tightening this bolt. There's no point me showing you because you can't see anyway. Once the bolt is tight, I'm going to bend that little tab back on top of the bolt. That completely locks it in place. Then we can actually tighten the two bearings properly. So I've hit that little tab back. All I did is I got my little lever bar again, and just because it's a hittable lever bar, and I just hit it with a hammer, and that's knocked the little tab back over the bolt. So it's locked on the head of the bolt, and it's also locked on that big kind of U-shaped washer. Now, so we know that that's fine. And I've also tightened, like I said, the 4 bolts in the far prop shaft. So this should be kind of hanging more or less pretty level. What I'm going to do is I'm about 5 or 6 mil away from actually getting these completely up to the top. So what I'm going to do now is just going to shoot them up a little bit more, just until they're kind of meeting at the top. And what you're actually looking for is the holes to be the same size on each side. This one isn't, this one's slightly twisted. This one is more or less bang on. And also what you're looking for is to make sure the rubber isn't pushed. So what I mean by that is you can see the rubber around here, to make sure that's not being pushed the wrong way, it's not being stretched, it's in a natural position. Once it's in a natural position, see even now, I can't hit that down like I did before. You could hear horrible banging before. I can't do that now. So even now they're not fully tight, you can hear the difference between them is good. But I just need to get these straight. And like I said, the easiest way is just to line up the gaps you've got in your bolts here. So I know this one needs to be tucked over a slight bit. Now, that is nice and level. I'm looking directly underneath it. And this one needs to go over there a tad. And again, that is nice and level. Like I said at the beginning, you can mark these, but you can't really go off them. As it turns out, this one's more or less lined up directly on its marks, but it just depends who makes them. They might be slightly wider here, or there could just be loads of reasons, but as long as it's level, it's not putting any pressure on the bearing. Now the test is in the drive, so you still have to take it for a test drive and see to make sure there's nothing rattling or banging and there's no vibrations. Then you know you've got it right. That went back a little bit. Now what you can do is just spin it by hand to make sure it spins. It does everything it's supposed to do, which it is doing. I hit that washer a little bit, but that's not really the end of the world. And yeah, it's in. I can't bang it down like I did before. It's in place, it's all tightened up. Test drive will actually tell you properly if you are going to work or not. But we've lined up with all our original marks, so we know we shouldn't be out of balance as regards that. It's gone in place, there's nothing stressed, the bearings aren't twisted, they're nice and level. We shouldn't have a problem. And that's it really, that's how you do carrier bearings on 2005 Freelander. So look, hope it helps. Thumbs up and subscribe. Don't forget, check out our forum website, sign up to our forum and all that. And most importantly, don't forget, get your hands dirty. See you for the next one.